photographer and co-owner of Woods Photography Studio, which he has operated alongside his wife Nancy for 38 years. Together, they photograph a wide variety of subjects, everything from people and pets to cars. A significant portion of their work is dedicated to photographing dancers at several Central Illinois dance studios and capturing portraits of students and athletes at Clinton High and Junior High. Mark and Nancy also share a passion for history and genealogy. This interest often leads them to research inspired by discoveries in old photographs. One important aspect of their business is the copying and digital restoration of vintage photos. On any given day, their desk is filled with historical photographs awaiting restoration. Over the years, working with these treasured memories has become a vital and deeply meaningful part of their studio's mission. Welcome.
Thank you. I think everybody in the room knows me pretty much. We've probably done work for many of you. So what she mentioned, she asked me for a bio, and I don't really have a bio. I had to type that up, and then I thought, well, how much do you want to say? So we've been here a long time. 38 years is a long time to run a business, and we plan on being here a long time yet to come. And we've done all kinds of things over the years. There isn't anything we haven't photographed, I don't think. And but we certainly, the things that she listed are some of the things that we spend a lot of time doing. I thought we'd start. This is, if any of you didn't hear, this is my little puppy here. That's his birthday picture. He was 7 on Friday, so I thought we'd start with him because we do photograph pets. And I was just going to flip through a few things that she mentioned as we get started here. We do photograph pets, and we photograph probably many of your grandchildren. If you have grandchildren that have been in Clinton schools, I've done high school for 25 years. I've done their photographs, and junior high even before that. So we see a lot of these kids. The funny thing is about seeing the kids is, in my mind, they never grow up, and I never understand that when I see them out working in the public, shouldn't you be in gym class? They don't grow up in my mind. So we see a lot of these kids. I have a hard time remembering some of their names, but we see a lot of kids. We photograph things like old cars. This is in front of the homestead. This is Jim Morris's car, his Nash Metropolitan that we did. And so we get to do a variety of things here. This is one of our several dance studios. This is just happens to be their competition team that we do, as well as individual dancers, and we do them inside and outside. So we get to do all kinds of fun stuff and see some phenomenal things. Families as well in the studio. But history is an important part of what we do. We enjoy historical photographs. We enjoy genealogy. My wife is constantly researching stuff family-wise and has been doing that for years and years and years. And seeing historical photographs come through, and a collection of our own, of course, we get to explore all kinds of things. And we get to have some fun. We're going to talk about photographs here. I love doing the history and photographs here. So this that you're looking at is the Clinton Square. This is the earliest known photograph that I've ever seen of Clinton Square. This was taken in about 1873, I assume, because the hotel had been completed. So we have the schoolhouse in the background, which was the first school building there. That's now a vacant lot. That's Prairie, I don't remember, Prairie View or whatever they call that area now. That was the first big school, I should say. There was one before that. We have the hotel in the middle, and then we have the 1849 courthouse. This is actually the second courthouse we had in town. Something that's very important about this is that we look at the side of the courthouse, and there are 8 windows. 4 windows above, 4 windows below. This is the south side of the courthouse. And that's crucial because we use photographs to date other photographs when we're going through things. So when we come across something like this, and we look at it, it has 7 windows and a door, which tells me this is after that other photograph. And since we're pretty sure the other photograph was taken in about 1873 or thereabouts, we know this has to be after that at some point. And that helps us get a lineage and a line so that we can follow history as we go through. This, for instance.
Can I interrupt you one moment?
Yep.
On your Zoom screen, is your microphone muted?
Clue. Can you call me?
Can you bring your screen up?
never done Zoom, I apologize. Audio right there.
She can hear now.
She can hear now. Probably because we touched that screen. So no audio, Wi-Fi, or dial-in. Well, I assume Wi-Fi is what we want, right? To hear others? Although I don't want to hear it. Is that what
I
we
guess so.
want? Okay. So now let's go back to my screen.
Yeah, that's better.
Now you go. Okay. All right, so here we are. We've got an echo in the room. One of my voices enough. Okay, so we have this photograph, this older woman standing out there. And this actually happens to be at 210 East Van Buren. So this is the corner of Monroe and Van Buren. You would be looking at the parking lot of IGA. And that would be my great-great-grandmother. But the only reason I know that photograph is my great-great-grandmother is because I have this one in front of the exact same house of a much younger woman holding my grandmother. This one is documented. The other one was not. This one was well documented, written on the back, the whole story. And so I know that's my grandmother, and I know that's my great-great-grandmother. And then we have this one later when she's older. And that's the only way we would have known what this was. If we didn't have the first photograph, we wouldn't understand the second one. My family goes back to before the county. My family falls in line with like the Fruit family. Goes clear back in genealogy-wise, clear back to the Fruit family. So before the county was the county. So this would be Virginia Mills Johnston is who that woman is. And my grandmother is Ethel Bennett. My grandmother, she complained later in life, she said when she was a little kid, she'd have to walk on the boardwalk that was out there in front of her house and get splinters in her feet. So that's how long ago that was. Because this would be about 1897, I think, yeah. So, pictures are important. We have all kinds of things. They may be important to me, only to me, but they may also be important to other people. So, who do we have in the picture we recognize? Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
That's Marilyn Monroe. This gentleman standing beside her, who I did not get the name today, I forgot to look it up, but this gentleman standing beside her was from Bement, Illinois. And this happens to be, in 1955, the centennial of Bement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is it important? Well, it's got Marilyn Monroe in it. But who knows Sandy Archie? You guys know Sandy Archie?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's her father standing there with the glasses.
Oh,
And Sandy would have been 11 years old when this was
Is
taken.
that Gary Archie's wife?
Gary's Archie's wife, yeah.
Okay.
So this is Sandy's dad, and she happened to be there and get to enjoy this whole event and got to meet Marilyn Monroe because they invited Marilyn Monroe to come and judge a beard contest for the Bement Centennial, and she actually did it because of this other gentleman in the picture, and he had the connections. So pictures are important for a variety of reasons. This is important to a family, but it's also important to people who might be interested in Marilyn Monroe because this is a kind of this little skinny part of her history that a lot of people don't know about. So now, pictures are important. Who do we know in the picture? Anybody know anybody in that picture?
Is that Johnny Warner?
Bingo.
But I don't know who the other.
David Moss.
Oh my God, has he changed?
So that's David and John.
What year, though?
Well, whenever his first wedding was, don't ask me, whenever David's first wedding was, and John was his best man.
Is it the 70s?
Well, definitely the
Seven-
70s.
oh, yeah, yeah, look
That's
at
what
it.
I meant.
Yeah, it's, you know.
Yeah.
So we get a variety of things in from people. They may not be important to me, but they're important to them.
Oh yeah.
This was taken from a picture no bigger than $50. But because it was a tintype, we all know what a tintype is. A tintype was actually in the camera when the picture was taken instead of a negative. There was no negative. The tintype was actually what the photograph was captured on. So the detail of it is incredibly sharp as long as the camera was focused properly and everything. You probably don't know who that is. You should, but you don't. But this picture might help. Do you know who that is? Vespasian Warner.
Yeah.
The first picture is Vespasian Warner when he was in Washington, I think is where this picture was taken, in D.C. And this is a later in life picture that was also taken in Washington when he was a member of the House of Representatives. So we get, like I said, this is a tintype, and it's actually been somewhat restored because it was damaged. It depends on what we get, on what we can get out of it. You've probably heard the saying garbage in, garbage out. If I have a poor quality to start with, sometimes it's hard to get a good quality in the end. But when we start with good quality, it's really easy. So something like that, I can make that the size of the wall. It's so good quality. So something like this, I have the negative to this. Ray Macy took the photograph. This was in 1969, I think. The County Museum downtown. We can see that Smiths had their office up there above the bank at the time. Sharps here. And I don't know what they're doing, but it had something to do with the museum, I'm sure. Probably a precursor to Apple and Pork, maybe. But extremely sharp because we have something good to work with to begin with, because we're working with the negative. Okay, so this is, well, what we all know is Doc Gordon's office, but it was the post office first and is now Mid-State Eye. This is a postcard. Next to it is the Journal building.
Mm-hmm.
It's not terrible. You can read the Journal. You can kind of make out that says post office. Here's the deal with postcards, or many postcards. They're done as a halftone is what they call them. When they do the printing process, they turn into all these little dots. And it makes it very difficult to read anything. So when we get a postcard from somewhere and they want a copy of it, say for the wall, say a business wants a copy of it for the wall, you're only going to get such, a certain level of quality out of it before it just falls apart because of that. But if you have the original photograph, which I happen to have, it's a whole lot clearer and a whole lot easier to work with. So again, when we get stuff from clients, that's really something that we have to be concerned about is how good is that original photograph? And what are we going to be able to get out of it? We can even read that says the Morning Journal, job printing, and I think it even says bookshop here in the window. Makes a big difference. I think you can count the stars in the flag. And if you'll notice, that building back there was the creamery. That's going to come up later in our conversation. This whole building will come up in our conversation later, but that's the creamery when they added a story to it. Because it started out as one story. It's now an empty parking lot that they use for the eye office, but that started out as a one-story building and ended up being a two-story building. Let's see. Okay, so sometimes we don't get great quality to start with, and we can only go so far with it, but it still tells us a story. We can zoom in and read Gottlieb's, so we know what direction we're facing. We can see, can you make out that right there? This right here is a post clock. I actually had two on the square at one point that looked like a pocket watch. It would have been out there because Smith Jewelry was there. You'll see that the Ohio building, which just says Gottlieb's on it, the building next to it is 3 stories as high as Ohio building. It was later made 2 stories. So again, those are telltale signs to help us identify and date the photograph. I think it's interesting. You've got this group sitting here or standing here on the corner talking. I think it's funny. They're talking around what looks to be a mailbox on the corner. This is part of, I'll do the plug now while I'm thinking of it. The Homestead is working on a project of restoring and displaying some of their photographs. We've been working with them, and when we started it, we all kind of thought it would be a small project. There may not be as much interest as we would like, but we were going to do it anyhow. Well, now 40 pictures later, it's a lot bigger than we thought it was going to be. And we're still working on it. She hoped to introduce it April 1st. That wasn't going to happen because we just couldn't get everything completed. this is one of the photographs we've been working on for her, and they're all 11 by 14 is the size they're going to be when they're on display there. And she has a great collection there that we've been working on. The interesting thing is, I'm going to go back one. Oops, I'm going to go back to that picture. If you let me. See, the top corner is missing. I'm going to put that away for a second. You see, the top corner is missing.
Oh,
This is a good time to talk about this. And sometimes it gets confusing. When someone brings me a picture, they say, I want 8 by 10 of this. The difficult thing is sometimes things don't fit in an 8 by 10 because of what's called the aspect ratio. It may be twice as long as it is high. Well, the problem is if I try to put that on a 10-inch piece of paper, it's only going to be 5 inches tall then, because it's twice as long as it is high. If you try to make it longer, it's still going to keep that ratio. So you're going to end up with a strip through there. Or it could be the other way around. It could be very square, and you try to put it in an 8 by 10, well, it's only going to be 8 by 8 inside that 8 by 10. And some people want me to stretch it or do something to it. So we're able to do some tricks. So in this instance, we're not changing history in any way, and that's an important part of all the work that we do. We don't want to be altering any of the historical facts of this. But we're able to go from that to that without anybody noticing that we've made any minor changes to the image. And we're still able to keep everything in the photograph. We haven't changed history. We haven't added windows or changed the dimensions of the buildings or anything like that. We've just done some minor tricks to try to help it fill the page and look authentic without changing history. So this is a common thing that we'll get. Now this is a photo booth photograph, and we see these, and these are popular for people to collect now, I've found. They're only about 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches big, but we all have them. We've all done them.
Yeah.
And so this is my mother-in-law when she was a teen. So this would be 1930 maybe. And not a lot of work needs to be done here. We can easily just turn it into this. Get them straightened, clean up the edges, clean up some of the cracks that were in it. I'll go back to before and after. Two things I'll mention real quick too. Your screen resolution may be a little different than mine, so bear with me there. And also, color. The color of a black and white. Sometimes you don't want it black and white, you don't want it stark. So we'll do it in a variety of different shades. You'll see when they release the ones for the Homestead, and if you tour through there, you'll see that there are a variety of different brown tones because they didn't want them all the same. They wanted to have some variety to them. Most of the brown tone that you see, some of them were toned that way originally intentionally, and some of them have just faded over time, and that's what's happened. So. Anybody know who that is?
The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, the man behind the curtain. That's C.H.
Yeah.
Moore. That's the very first, the earliest, I should say, the earliest photograph we have is C.H. Moore. You can see there's foxing and some damage, and of course it's horrible color because it's faded over the years, and we're able to come to this. We haven't changed anything historically. We've kept it in the oval. We haven't tried to add anything to it. We've just tried to make it more presentable for people to enjoy. This is an interesting note too. Okay, so see the line across his chest? Can everybody see that line going across there? It's also there. We kept it, of course. Abraham Lincoln, there's a famous photograph of Abraham Lincoln where there's a line going across his chest. And over the years, many people have removed that. Many photographers that were copying the picture removed that line because they thought it was a crack or damage. And it wasn't. It was a cord for his glasses. And so it would hold his glasses, then pull it out, put it on their nose, and they put it back. Okay, so then sometimes we don't get what we want. This particular person said, I don't have the picture that you need. I have it on my phone. Here's what I've got. This is all I've got. Okay. So, and this actually came from a yearbook. They brought me this. Not great quality, we get it, but they want this lady right here out of the picture. They want her and nobody else. And I'm like, okay, well, so the first thing I did, this is our, start your research here. The first thing I did was, where did the picture come from? Well, it came from a yearbook. We can get yearbooks. So I was able to get the yearbook online, and download the image. Now, it wasn't much better than what he gave me. And he wanted her cut out of there, so this is what we end up with.
Wow.
Wow.
And the goal is whatever he wants, right? So if this is what he wants, this is what we do. And I think it worked out pretty well, considering what we had to start with. So again, one of these, this is similar to the photo booth thing. It's kind of a vacation picture here maybe. We're somewhere special, we're going to get our picture taken. But of course now we've got damage on there. Minor damage, but still we can clean it up. Don't pay attention to the fact that she's hot pink on there because that's your screen up there. But we're able to restore some of the color and get rid of the damage and still keep it historically correct. We get things like this. Now, I will say I'm not one for colorizing black and white photographs. If black and white, then black and white. We start with that. But this was not. This is a faded color photograph. She wanted it back in color the way that it belonged. So,
Wow.
we put it back in color. It's not quite as hot pink, like I said, as it is on your screen there, but able to get it back in color. Some damage, you just can't, you just have to live with. So the specklediness to it, that's just part of the vintageness of the photograph. And none of that bothers me. I just am more concerned about getting something back that whoever I'm working with is happy with. Because those things aren't important, I don't think. The speckledness, that's not important. Can we see them? Is it the way that she remembers or he remembers them? Okay, so this is the only photograph of Grandpa I have, and I want just his picture, is what the client says. Okay. And I have one of Grandma, but I don't have one of Grandpa. Okay. Well, keep in mind, I can only go so far with this. So there's what we have. And so we have a photograph now of Grandpa. This is one of these images from the homestead that we were talking about earlier. Now, the weird thing about this is the photographer didn't really frame it up very well. So we've got the top of this cut off, really strange, and a lot of ground. Well, how do you make that work in 11 by 14? What we'd like to do is move this all down and get rid of some of that foreground and add something to the top, but what do I do? Well, we talked about this and we said, okay, what's important? Well, the cart is what's important, the guys on it and the horse. We don't know where the photograph was taken. Probably somewhere in Clinton, because this is a Clinton-related photograph, but we don't know about this house in the background. We don't know if it still exists. It probably doesn't. We just don't know much about it. So does it hurt any historical value to try to do something with it? We didn't think so. So we came up with this.
Goodness.
How many have heard of AI? That's the big term right now, artificial intelligence.
Right.
Artificial intelligence is making leaps and strides in the photography world, and so thank goodness for artificial intelligence, we're able to recreate the top of that. Now, I will say, just like Photoshop, which we've heard about for 20 years now, Photoshop and artificial intelligence are just tools, okay? You're still not just pushing a button and magically it appears, okay? You're still just using them as tools to create what you want to create. And Photoshop, I tell people, it is still very much, photography is very much a hands-on business. I sit at a computer for hours a day with literally what's called a graphics tablet and a pen, and I'm looking at a monitor and I am fixing all of this on photographs digitally in the computer by hand. And it's just not, I'm not using a pencil or an ink pen. I'm using a graphics tablet and it's digital, but I'm still doing it all by hand. So this was something that we were able to create, be able to bring this down so that it was presentable and get it in an 11 by 14 format so that people can enjoy that. And this is for a brewing company, is what that was. So I don't know who any of the guys are. Okay, now if we get something that's really nice, and this was a really nice photograph, I can make this the size of the wall. It is such, the detail is so good in it.
Wow.
It is just absolutely incredible. We could just blow that up as big as we wanted to. This is the November 1911 train wreck. It was in all the newspapers clear to Chicago, and they were out there for days photographing this. People came from all over to photograph this. In fact, you have a panoramic sitting over there, I noticed earlier, of
Yes.
this from the other side of the trestle that shows the crane up above that they were using to maneuver everything. So this was, and that's the fun thing nowadays. I didn't know anything about this wreck, but I got this photograph and it had a date on it. I was immediately able to go newspapers.com and we start doing all the research and reading all the articles and everything and learning, you know, there were 3 killed and there was a 4th one that died later at the hospital and all what had happened. And actually, part of the deal was they were building this trestle. They hadn't finished, so the supports weren't there. And when they came back from Maroa with a full load, extra grain, in fact, they said, an extra car of grain, this wasn't able to support them and they weren't able to stop them soon enough and they went off. Okay, so there's what we started with. The woman came to me and she said, do you think you can do anything? And it's in numerous pieces. And it was all in an envelope in crumbs. And I said, yeah, I think we can do something with it. And she said, well, how much are you going to charge me? And I said, nothing. She said, what do you mean nothing? I said, well, see that lady that signed it down there? Yeah. That's my great-grandmother. Come to find out, her and I are cousins, and she didn't know it.
Yeah.
Because her grandmother and my great-grandmother were sisters. And so we were able to go from that to this. And we were able to win an award with that too. So we don't only deal with photographs. So this is a document, and we've dealt with a lot of documents too. Deal with documents, and able to work with that. And then something that you're probably familiar with. This is a painting of C.H. Moore, the original in the upper left-hand corner, that was found in his first home. Used to be Corky Peterson's out there. And Robin Billow lived in it last. That's now at the homestead. The original is at the homestead, and we recreated it and actually printed a large print of this. It used to be in one of the cabinets down here. And that took, I did that 3 inches at a time, 3 square inches at a time, or 3 by 3, 9 square inches at a time, boop, 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 and worked on that till we got that done. Okay, so, I'm doing good on time, great. I have some glass negatives from Wapella that someone brought me. And the first thing you always want to try to do is, when were they taken? Who took them? Well, nobody seems to know who took them, but we know what family they're connected to. But the nice thing is, there happens to be an ad for the Chautauqua in the background that says, August 16th through the 26th, 1901. So that was the first clue. We knew, okay, we're dealing with pictures from 1901. Well, maybe they're not all from 1901, but we weren't sure. This is in the depot at Wapella, this building. And again, glass negative. So we can read everything we want to read because it's such good quality. Okay, so in that same collection, we have this photograph pop up. And at first I said, okay, there's usually a reason. In those days they're taking a photograph. There's some reason. And we've got 3 guys standing out here. Why do we want why are these 3 guys important? They're standing out there having a picture taken. Well, this guy, I thought, he's wearing, looks like GAR ribbons, Civil War ribbons. So he's a veteran. You got these other 2 guys out there. So what's so important? And then we look and see that is President McKinley. And that around it is Black Creek. President McKinley had been assassinated. So this was September of 1901. So that goes along with our other photograph from 1901. So we're pretty sure the whole collection was from 1901. But then sometimes you find things you just can't believe. Isn't that darling?
Yes.
That's my favorite one in the whole thing. I don't know who it is. Well, he'd be he'd be way over 125 now. He's long gone, I'm sure. But isn't that sweet? We don't know who he is. I don't know what building that is.
Yeah.
We've tried to figure that out because we know it's from Wapella. But isn't that a sweet picture? What a grand portrait of someone. So things are important. All right. The new bank, Longview Bank out here, asked me to do some photographs for them, historical things, and we've done a few. And we did a map of Clinton that's got all the buildings downtown named. I think it's from 1894 and stuff. But we did this aerial. We're going to have a little fun with this for just a minute, and then I'll be done because I'm almost through my 30 minutes here. 1948. We know that positively, no question about it, was taken in 1948. Okay, so this is an aerial of downtown 1948. And there's the square. You can see the Ohio building there. We can see the hotel. You can see the courthouse. And I said, we're going to talk about this building again. So that is Doc Gordon's office in the Journal, or the post office at the time, before, and the Journal. This is the new post office over here, built in 1939. This is 1948. Creamery is back here. We've got all the trucks for the creamery lined up. That building there was Beatrice Foods, I found out. And we said, what are those sticking out of the top? The bank asked me, and I said, I have no idea. I never noticed them before. So good old Norman Huff, friend of mine, says, well, they look like stacks, don't they? They look like vent stacks of some sort. He said, I know what it is. He said, they made cottage cheese. They made cottage cheese in that building, and those are the vents for the vats of cottage cheese. They made cottage cheese there. I never knew that. And they were connected to the creamery back there. It was all one company. Okay, so we've got the bank, or the post office there, 1939, that was built. This is a treasure trove in itself. If we go here, this little building right here, let me see if I can zoom way in on it. Only let me go so far. That building right there, that little skinny one, is very old in that photograph, because it shows up in some of our earliest photographs of downtown. I don't know what it was. It was there for a long time. Let's see. Presbyterian Church and the old YMCA, you probably are familiar with there. The Catholic Church over here and the school behind it. My house doesn't hardly show up, but that's the barn for the homestead right there. And you can see the interurban tracks, see them going back through there? This would be my house right there. Let's see what else we can look at real quick. This is just great because you can nail things down if you're really looking like this. What's that big hole from? Does anybody know?
Where the Christian church burned down?
Bingo! Because it burned in either 46 or 47. And so this is just the hole from the church. You can see the interurban station there. Also, you can see the Methodist church. Looks a little vacant. You have the Universalist church behind it. You have what's called Gear Hall. That's part of the Methodist church. And then you have an empty lot because the old building had been torn down in 40, and the new building wasn't built until 53. And the Baptist church there had a lot of churches in one little area. So there's all kinds of stuff in something like that. I love it when we get something that's that well detailed. All right, so that's my 30 minutes. Questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
About this picture, actually.
Okay.
If you go down South Monroe,
South Monroe. Okay, I can only go so far.
right,
How
well,
far?
it's in there.
Okay.
There's a building that looks like an old horse stable that's still there. Do you know what that was?
Help me out. Point it. Can you see it on there?
Let's see now.
Okay, so there's the courthouse. Here's the courthouse. Here's Monroe Street. Monroe Street's going
Right.
down here. You have the bank drive-in is right here, right in that area, and then you've got Joe Taylor's old offices here.
Yeah, it's behind that, right? Your
Oh, you're
finger's
talking
on
about
it.
right in
Yep,
here.
Yep.
It's a carriage house for this house up here. It's the garage for this house. It's a carriage house, though. It was, and I don't know when it was built. If it was built in the days still of horses,
Looks really old.
yeah, it does.
It's still there?
You get to a certain, and it's got kind of little arches that hold up the eaves and stuff. You get to a certain era where they started building stuff for Model Ts, and they were really narrow openings that had the double doors. So I don't know. I haven't looked at that one close enough to know. It might have been clear back to the day of horse and buggy. I don't know. This is something you could just sit there and look at it. Things like the depot are over here, and you have
Oh, yeah.
the depot is there.
Nice.
And then you go down here, you've got, so that's the lumber yard, used to be Kent's. And then you had, that's the freight depot there. And then of course you've got the female and all that.
Is the roundhouse in the picture?
That's what I was
The
gonna say.
roundhouse, hold on, I gotta get my bearings for a second. The roundhouse is not.
I don't think it goes east far enough, does it?
Yeah.
No. Well,
Is it, you said the depot?
we
Was it
would be
you said?
clear down
Yes.
here.
Okay.
Yeah, you would be, so there's the depot. You'd be clear down in here. It's off the map, or
Okay.
off the picture. Yeah. You can see there's a couple of, these look like for water, probably. You have even, this is CH's first house back here. So Corky Peterson's and that road that goes out north of town, or out east of town, and the barn that's out there and stuff. There used to be a half-mile horse track out there, a very long time ago. Okay, so other questions though? I can talk about pictures all night. Okay, so just for fun for a second. Anybody know, has anybody seen that photograph before? That is Alice, as in Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, yeah.
Famous people you never knew were photographers. Lewis Carroll was a photographer. I have his entire collection book that shows all of his photographs. He was an avid photographer.
What's in the background?
Just vines and leaves and stuff. It was on a wall. He was in an area in England where you had a walled-in area with lots of vines and stuff growing on it. This, you don't know who this is. No, I don't know who it is. But Samuel Morris Code, was first a portrait painter and then a portrait photographer. This is one of the earliest examples of a daguerreotype in America that there ever was. And Samuel Morris was the first American to even see what they called a daguerreotype at the time. The earliest, in 1839, the earliest photographs that were around. So famous people you didn't know were photographers. It's just kind of fun that way. So, anything else?
Yeah, you mentioned the tintype.
Yeah.
There was no negative.
Right.
Okay, so it was a tintype. When did they come into use and when did they stop use?
Okay. So in the 1800s,
Yeah.
it began with daguerreotypes, which was 1839 to about 1860 would have probably been the last daguerreotypes that were being made. And those were on a piece of metal. They were highly polished, but you had to use mercury, which was very volatile, very dangerous, and people died from it. But those were the first types of photographs that were on metal. They were in the camera. That plate was in the camera, and the image was recorded onto it. And then those are in cases when you see them in antique malls and stuff. They're in a little case. The second type right after that, or during that kind of same time period, was ambrotypes, which was the same process kind of, but on glass. And so it was a
Brave used during the Civil War?
yes. Ambrotypes started about 1846, maybe in there, and went on clear until the 1880s. And then tintypes. Tintypes and ambrotypes are the same thing. Ambrotypes on glass, tintypes on metal. Okay? So there's three processes. The funny thing is, it's just like asking us now, when did paisley scarves go out of fashion? Well, it wasn't like it just a light switch happened and you didn't wear them anymore. It's a thing where they overlapped a lot. And so you have Abraham Lincoln being a wonderful example. There's a lot of photographs of him that, because they're very well documented, that were over these processes. So you have some that are ambrotypes, some that are tintypes, some that were done with negative and positive process, printing on paper. So because the processes overlapped. But yes, so during the Civil War, you had a lot of things going on. Daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, tintypes, and what they call wet plate or collodion negatives being made and prints being made from that.
When did the tintype fade out?
Oh, that's a funny question. In common practice, tintype stopped by the 1880s, but they were continuing being made on like the boardwalks in places until about the 1930s, because they were the Polaroid of the time. They could put the sheet in there, they could expose it, they could go back to their little thing that was on a stand usually in the dark with a hood over, develop it real quick, give it to the customer for a quarter, and off they went. And so it was the Polaroid of the day.
Can you tell us what this is?
Yep, this is a tintype. Yep, it's been beat up, man.
It
And
looks like-
tintypes came in a variety of sizes. because they had what they call gem size that were about the size of a quarter, all the way up to full plates that were like basically an 8x10, we'll call them. This is one of the most common, a 1/9 or a 1/6 sometimes would be a little bigger than this. This was a very common size.
It looks like it may have an official seal stamped on it.
Maybe.
And that, we found that in,
Well, this is cool. It's state of Kansas.
we found it in a probate record. And I think they were trying to positively identify this guy as being an heir of the man who died.
Yeah.
So they sent his
Notary
picture.
Public on there. I noticed so somebody stamped that. The notary kind of did a deal on that, didn't they? So what you got into? Let me back up. The very first process, the daguerreotype. There was one plate in the camera, one lens on the camera, one exposure. That's it. They're unique. By the time you got to tintypes, which was this very thin metal, and they were able to get the process down and they knew what they were doing, they were making cameras that had multiple lenses on the front of them. So you might sit down, it was very common to have a camera that had 4 lenses on it, one sheet, boom. You take one picture, one exposure, but now you have 4 of the same thing because you got 4 lenses on the plate, and they just cut the plate into quarters, 1/4 plate image. And so that's the way they made copies, basically. That's how you ended up with multiples of the same photograph. And so, with Abraham Lincoln's stuff being documented so well, I have a lot of books on it, they're able to identify exactly which lens of the 4 took which photograph because of the slight variation in angle, which is kind of interesting. So, but yeah, tintypes were made clear up into the 1930s. But most of these that you see are about
Okay.
1870.
Okay, because 9 years ago, you restored a family picture of my relatives.
Okay.
And I've always thought it was a tintype. I've never been able to exactly date it, but based on year of birth and how old she looks,
Right.
I'm thinking it was early to mid-20s. So it still could have been a tintype.
Could have been, sure.
Okay.
Sure, could have been. Like I said, those were used for a novelty. By the time you got it clear up into the 30s, they were being used as a novelty. But the most common era was from the 1860s and 1870s and 1880s. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Anything else?
Thank you very much. It
Sure,
was
well, thanks for
interesting.
having me. Yeah, thanks.